Hello, and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Scott Brady, and I'm joined today by a very unique guest, Johan de Villiers. Now, Johan has spent a lifetime in Southern Africa, but he has also spent a lifetime traveling the world. He's been to over 50 countries. He's climbed 4 of the 7 summits. He has learned a great deal about overlanding and has explored most of Southern Africa by overland vehicle. He's ridden adventure motorcycles across Myanmar. He's also done some incredible survival and other training courses. But beyond all that, Johan is also a very accomplished business person. So this is a unique opportunity to have a conversation with a successful IT professional and CEO that has learned a lot about business, but has been able to learn how to translate back to travel and how to take some of his lessons from travel and translate those back into business. Now, he has recently published a book called Overlanding Through the Boardroom, which is available on Amazon and some other sources. It is a lengthy volume, and it goes into not only his adventures, but also his more profound lessons that he's gained in the 30 plus years in the IT world. We talk a little bit about investing. We talk about strategies around building teams and leadership while traveling. We talk a little bit about his Land Rover Defender. We have really a wide-ranging conversation, and I suspect that this will be the first of many in a series with Johan. So please enjoy my conversation with Johan.
Maybe it's the promise of new experiences and discoveries. The allure of the unknown. That's why we do what we do. It's why we are a pioneer in building off-road, off-grid RVs. And it's what makes our Backcountry series models the perfect companion for a life of adventure. These vehicles feature off-road capability, reliable off-grid power, and freshwater capacity, plus multifunctional layouts that give you enhanced gear storage and workspace, and the comfort needed to relax in the kinds of places where our Backcountry series vehicles thrive. Take, for instance, the Echo, which introduces off-road camper van utility to a rugged yet spacious Class C. Or the Revel, the ultimate adventure-ready van, boasting up to 7 days of fully off-grid power. And then there's the Solus, a supremely flexible and thoughtfully designed camper van that has everything you need, and a few things you never knew you did. The right vehicle can open up entire worlds, but with a Backcountry series RV, no matter where you set up camp, you'll still find all the touches of home. Because in a world where less is often more, it turns out that sometimes more can still come in pretty handy. Explore our Backcountry series. Winnebago RVs, purpose-built for life beyond the open road.
Johan, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today. It's about 5:30 in the evening for you in Cape Town, and about similar time, 8:30 or so in the morning here in Arizona, and we get a chance to finally catch up. I've followed your work for many years. You've done a lot of work for us at Overland Journal. You've written some incredible articles on recovery. You've built some impressive vehicles. You've had some incredible travels around the world. And of course, recently, you just came out with your book, Overlanding Through the Boardroom, which is a great volume on business and how it relates to travel and adventure, and how adventure also relates to business. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Privileged to be here. Thank you, Scott.
Well, let's start off with a little bit of background on you. What part of the world did you grow up? You mentioned a little bit of time that you spent in the United States, but let's talk a little bit about how life started for you.
Yeah, so I was born in Pretoria, just outside Johannesburg, and my family then moved to Stellenbosch, which is a bit of a university town. My dad was quite active in the field of genetic engineering and biochemistry, and surprisingly, the beer companies wanted that kind of skill in terms of increasing the yields, in terms of the crops, the wheat and the barley, et cetera, that guys like, Bud and Heineken and those guys utilize. So at an early age, the family got the opportunity to move to UCLA in Davis. And we spent a couple of years there. And then moved back to Stellenbosch. I went to university there, and then ended up living on the west coast of Cape Town in a little place called Melkbos Strand. So I use this as a base, which is great for traveling in Africa. Expensive if you want to get back to the States, of course, or Southeast Asia or those places. But yeah, as a base, Cape Town. And with our currency, I think it's the only place we can still get rand parity.
That makes sense. And you're and not a long drive, and you're up into Namibia. There's that whole west coast of Africa is impressive. So
Yeah, basically 7 hours, 6.5 hours to the border of Namibia, and maybe 9 hours, and you're in Botswana. And of course, from Botswana, you've got the beautiful Delta, the Caprivi, and from there, proper, Zambia and Central.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what an incredible place to live too. There's one of the things that I really liked about Cape Town is it had very much a spirit of Africa to it, but there was also some really great restaurants and there was good infrastructure, and you have people like Paul Marsh there that are incredible resources for building
Yes.
overland vehicles, and so it has become, I would say, like the capital of adventure within Africa.
Yeah, I mean, you've got one of your employees, Graham Bell. I mean, he's
Yeah,
from South Africa, and of course, we've got the legendary Kingsley Holgate
yeah.
that you know well as well. So, yeah, I think Australia, South Africa, and the States are probably the three guys that really, really like to specialize in the overlanding on the overlanding side.
Yeah, I've always thought that you know Australia coined the term because of overland cattle driving, and then the South Africans figured out how to make stuff last over the long haul, how to make quality components, and then the Americans have figured out how to make money at it.
Yeah, I was about to say, guys know how to commercialize it properly, how to scale the business properly.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So we've all brought our bit to the table for sure.
Yeah. The one thing I have to give the Australians credit for is that they stuck to Toyota, whereas in South Africa we've still got a plethora of Land Rovers,
Yeah.
and that's an entirely different debate. If you want to go on an adventure, you need to get a Land Rover, but if you want to make it home, you have to get a Land Cruiser.
That's a fact. That's a fact. In fact, I think one of the best ways I've heard it described is Toyota for work, Land Rover for play. And I think that people forget that the idea is adventure. So like anybody who drives like an old series Land Rover on a long trip, they're going to have an incredible adventure because all of the unexpected things are going to happen, and they're going to be driving slow, and they're going to be interacting with the locals, they're going to be fixing the vehicle. They're going to have a different adventure than someone that's in a 70 series, where they don't even have to pop the bonnet on it.
Yeah, yeah. It's I compare Land Rover ownership to owning an old Labrador. That that it's time for euthanasia, but you can't get it over yourself to put your old dog down. So it becomes a labor of love. It's an emotive decision. That's why they've all got names. Nobody names their Toyotas, but there's no Land Rover Defender that doesn't have a nickname by its owner.
That's so true. Well, let's talk a little bit about your Defender. That's an impressive vehicle. Is it? Do you still have the orange one?
Very much so.
And let's talk a little bit about what model it is and what are some of your most favorite modifications you've done to that.
So it's originally a 2004 TD5, the 110 four-door pickup series that I started modifying quite heavily for overland travel. You guys did Graham Bell did a stunning article, I think, in Expedition Portal on that.
Yeah.
It's really been a work in progress for me because, the moment that you put, alley cab tent on or some winch or whatever the case may be, the overlanding community and the market is developing so quickly that, there's no new switch gear coming out next month, or there's a plasma rope that's going to, replace your steel cable. So there's always an excuse to be spending some money on it. And I think at this point in time, I've got to the point where the money I've invested is going to be a lot more than the book value of the vehicle when I try and sell it one day. But when you climb in that machine and you turn the ignition, it always feels like the start of an adventure, even if you're just doing the milk run on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, sure.
So there's just something about the chug of a 5-cylinder, 20-year-old 5-cylinder starting up. In terms of heavy mods, suspension, of course, quite heavily modified OME. Engine, I've tried to stay away from mods too much, other than playing a little bit with the mapping on the ECU and upgrading the intercooler a bit. And then the normal stuff, long range fuel tanks, long range. I'm a diesel fan, just in terms of water crossings. I'm quite a diesel fan in terms of overlanding itself. And I try and stick to, the PACE philosophy in terms of for every system, I try and have a backup system and a backup system for that system, the primary, alternate, I think contingent and emergency. And of course, it's impractical for a number of things, like water. But, if your water tank's got a leak, at least you've got some jerry cans, and the jerry cans has got an issue, have a life straw or some water purification or whatever the case may be. And the same with the communication systems in the vehicle. I'd like my Starlink. And if the Starlink is not available, VHF, and of course, mobile cell phone reception, we've got that. So you can't always have four alternate strategies on all your different systems, but you can definitely have two. I always say aim for perfection and settle on best effort. And that's of course also something that you can carry over to business as well.
Yeah, and I think that there are a few systems that are worth taking that extra effort. Like you talked about water. Water is something from an emergent perspective that if you were to break down in the Kalahari, that you need to be able to have water to survive, or at least until help can arrive. So I like the idea of having multiple water tanks, then also having the ability to filter water as well, and then probably even having an emergency stash of water just in case the vehicle was to catch fire and you needed to evacuate the vehicle quickly and grab a ditch bag or something that would at least have maybe a couple liters of water in it in the case of emergency. And certainly for communications, I think about in Africa, the times that I was so remote that I didn't have cell coverage for days. And, you have to really be mindful of the fact that Starlink is, I think, a good primary source of communication because it's so effective. And then your contingent is probably going to be your cell phone. And then, your emergency will probably be something like an inReach, a small messenger or a satellite phone.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think it's good to have, when it comes to the most important things, it's really good to have at least 2 or 3 or 4 systems.
Yeah, and of course, I think water and comms, as you've highlighted, are probably the most important. But also recovery gear. Don't just rely on that winch. Know how to utilize that high lift jack. And in some cases, a high lift jack is not going to get you out of it. Like a muddy swamp, like kind of terrain or whatever. Then make sure you've got an exhaust jack. Inflatable exhaust jack. It weighs nothing, packs away, very compact. But there you've got 3 systems already: winch, high lift, and exhaust jack. There's no excuse not to have that level of preparation.
Yeah. Especially when you're traveling solo, which I believe that you and I both do to a great deal. So, I have to be
Yeah.
self-sufficient.
Yeah, probably 90% of all of my travels in the Kim and I have probably hit about 50 countries all up, and probably 99% of it has been solo. I like solitude, to be absolutely honest with you. It also means that in terms of that self-reliance puts it entirely on me if something goes wrong. You can't blame somebody else. You prepped that vehicle, you provided the platforms, the systems, the backup, etc. It was your preparation, and the problem solving is up to you to get out of that situation as well.
Yeah.
And it's difficult in the middle of expedition or convoy to tell vehicle 3 and 4 to exit.
Sure. To be willing to tell people that, this isn't working and we
Yeah,
either need to change
the
the
hard
plan.
conversation, Scott.
Yeah.
Uh,
And you have those on a regular basis in business. Are there any things that you have found that where there's a parallel in communication between expeditions and business that you kind of come back to?
so, there's three golden threads that I utilize in business that I think you can draw a parallel directly back to adventure and specifically overlanding. And for me, the first one is awareness. In business, you've got your awareness of your competitors. You've got the awareness in terms of the general economy. What's going on around you. And of course, if you need to know what the market is doing. So if you look at overlanding, you need to know in terms of travel, what is the situational awareness in terms of wildlife dangers around you, changing weather patterns that might affect road conditions, tribal conflict in an area that you're about to go in, or travel restrictions that differs from country to country. So that awareness is something that I find there's a direct parallel between business and overlanding. Following awareness, I would say, is preparedness. In business, you need to put the right teams together with the right kind of personalities and skill sets. You need to think carefully in terms of how you allocate your capital, your products, your people, etc., in terms of resource management. And that extends, to what we just discussed in terms of resource management of things like fuel and water and recovery gear on your rig. So you can see that there's once again a very direct correlation between those. And then I would say that the third and most important one for me is the willingness to act. So, in business, it's one thing to have a business plan or a marketing strategy, but not enacting it is obviously an issue. You need to be able to pull the trigger in terms of a capital spend commitment, or to go and spend the marketing budget, and believe that ROI will prove itself, or make the difficult investment decision in business. But that same willingness to act extends through to being on a journey or an expedition where a travel companion gets injured, or you get to a flooded river, or even an engine breakdown. That the willingness to act needs to be there. So that preparedness, the awareness, and the willingness to act are really overlapping business and adventure characteristics for me that I find very useful.
Yeah, and that I can see the parallel with that in travel, in the sense that people can get very focused on where they want their destination that they want to get to, and they can get into that cascade of events where things are slowly going the wrong direction, but they're not adjusting. They're not changing their plan. They're not making the decision, like you said, the decisiveness to say, we're going to stop and reassess, or we're going to make a right instead of going forward. And I have seen quite a few overlanders get themselves where the vehicle is maybe slowly declining as well. The vehicle's having some issues. It's making noises, but they're so focused on getting to the summit that they ignore those things because they want to get to their goal. And that could put them at great risk and their travel companions at great risk.
Yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned that. I mean, you and I were chatting in terms of, you were asking me what lessons in business have I learned that you can actually apply to travel, to your point. And I thought that's a great question. I actually had to go and think about that a little bit. And it wasn't actually, I think that the biggest one for me wasn't actually from business. It was actually in my days at flight school. For my sins, when I sold my first company, I had a restraint of trade in terms of working for a couple of years. And my wife told me to stay busy. So I enrolled in helicopter flight school. And by the way, I love that. If I stop overlanding, I'd love to fly again, but it's an expensive hobby to have on the side. But anyway, long story short, in flight school, they teach you something called the Swiss cheese effect. And the Swiss cheese, just to explain it simplistically, the Swiss cheese, every layer of Swiss cheese is a defensive safety system that is applicable to flight, but of course to business as well. So every layer of Swiss cheese is something that you need to attend to, and the holes in the Swiss cheese are vulnerabilities in that system. But if there's another backup system that covers that slice of cheese, the hole gets covered. So if you understand what I'm saying. So,
Yes. Yeah.
so for pre-flight on a plane or a helicopter, your first layer of Swiss cheese that needs to be checked. The first safety protocol is in terms of your pre-flights is your fuel quantity and quality. Then there's, your next would be, your weather en route and what's the weather going to be at the actual landing site. Never mind what the weather is where you departing from. And then, do you have an alternate landing site en route if something goes wrong? Another layer of Swiss cheese is your weight and balance. That lady back left in the helicopter, is she actually, in terms of weight and balance of the machine, is she actually offsetting the machine's, center of gravity? So each one of those is a layer of Swiss cheese, and you can get away by ignoring one of them. So let's say you didn't check what the weather is at your destination. And as you come in, you realize that, it's not V8 visual flight rules. You're not going to be able to land there. But luckily, in terms of your flight plan, you had an alternate arrangement and you've still got excess fuel and you can turn around and depart to that airport, to that landing strip. So you got away with the fact that you didn't check the weather. But you continue ignoring those layers of Swiss cheese, and sooner or later, those holes starts aligning and you can see straight through. And at flight school, they say to you, if you become complacent enough or negligent enough to ignore enough layers of Swiss cheese, you eventually, when those holes line up, you're going to see the face of God smiling at you on the other side. And of course, that's when there's something tragically going wrong. Now you can apply that Swiss cheese effect, that mindset, you can apply to your business, of course, as well. People worry about profit and loss, but cash flow is 10 times more important to a business than profit and loss, because you can sustain a loss for a number of years, depending, on your investors or what your bank account looks like. But cash flow, if you don't have money to pay your suppliers, they put you on hold. You can't supply stock, your sales stops. So things like your working capital, your cash flow, managing your debtors book correctly, those are all layers of Swiss cheese that requires your attention and your focus. And at your own peril, start ignoring those layers of Swiss cheese and the whole starts lining up. And of course, it's directly transferable to how you prepare your overland rig, in terms of not having backup systems if your water tank starts leaking, or you start losing some diesel, out of a cracked fuel line or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I think if somebody had to ask me what is the primary philosophy for me is that Swiss cheese effect. It's something that stuck with me for many years.
And what's interesting, I mean, that's a great analogy. And oftentimes we'll see travelers actually introducing additional holes in the layers of cheese. So, for an example of that would be you take, a Toyota Land Cruiser, and then you replace one of the suspension components with something custom that
Yeah,
you can't find in any other village or city or town throughout Africa. So the more that you keep the vehicle serviceable, because there's a huge Toyota dealer network throughout Africa, the more that you keep that vehicle serviceable, the less holes you've introduced to the Swiss cheese. Whereas to your point, like if you put in some fancy Heim joint, long travel, whatever, and that thing breaks on you in Botswana, you're going to have to fly it in. You're
yeah,
going to have to DHL that piece into Maun after you got a long tow and you had to sit in a hotel for 4 or 5 days.
yeah,
So don't introduce more holes into the cheese.
yeah.
Keep
Good
keep the
point.
system keep the systems as serviceable and reliable as you can. And
Yeah,
oftentimes that means keeping them as stock as possible as well.
yeah, yeah. So you asked me a question earlier before we started rolling the tape here in terms of what travel advice I would give my younger self, and it made me think. In the early 2000s, we had an IT company. I was still in my 30s then, unfortunately for me now, but just before we sold our IT company in I think it was 2007 or thereabouts, I sent myself from our management.
Good time.
Yeah, '08 financial crisis. Just before we sold the company, I came across an American management firm called the Pacific Institute. They're actually still around, TPI, excellent management company, and they do various executive courses, etc., etc. And this is not the point of the story, but for somebody who wants to go and Google it, there was a course called Investment and Excellence, which reprograms your mind the ability to lock in and lock out in terms of goals or business objectives. So it teaches you to ignore the white noise when you've got a business goal or objective. And in order to do that, it's a course over 60 days, 3 days of intensive training, then 30 days where you practically go and implement it, and then another 2 days followed by 30 days of implementation. And then the last day is the wrap up. Now, where I'm going with this story is I'll never forget that the American facilitator here in Cape Town went on stage on the last day after 60 days of immersion and said that, you know what, they've done this course, I think, in 28 countries and over 40,000 delegates in over the years. And what they did is they did a survey with retirees in terms of their biggest regrets. And with the 85% correlation, no matter which country they surveyed, they had the same three regrets. And the first one was that I should have had more fun when I had the opportunity to. The second one was I should have taken more risk when I was younger, obviously calculated risk. And surprisingly, the third one was I should have been more substantial in somebody else's life. And even at my 30s, that struck me so hard. Have more fun, take more risk, and be more substantial in somebody's life. That's become ingrained in my DNA, and that is why the only reason I work is to generate the funds to be able to have more adventures and to travel more, whilst your body as primary vehicle, of course, can still carry it. But have more fun, take more risk, and be more substantial. Nobody said bigger mansion next to the sea or a faster 0 to 100 Ferrari or Tesla S model plate. It was those three things.
what tools have you implemented to make a difference in others' lives? When you talk about being substantial in someone else's life, what are some things that you have found has worked for you to make a difference for others?
I've rolled out a program we invest a huge amount of our profits back in terms of making our people better. I always tell somebody, an exec, when they join me, I said, you're joining me as version 1.0, and I want you to leave as version 3.0, you know? And what we've done is we implemented a program that we call MIG, MEG, you know, like the Russian fighter plane, but, you know, that's just for and giggles that we call it that. But the MIG is actually, the M is for motivational, the I is for disruptive innovation, and the G is to focus on personal growth. So that is what the M, the I, and the G is actually for. And what it really does is we get people to choose something completely left of central, which has got nothing to do with our company business, but that is absolutely vital to understand going forward in terms of the rate at which technology and industries are changing. So one guy might decide to go for, EV or PEV vehicles. Somebody might say, renewables in terms of solar, wind, whatever the case might be. Somebody else might be in drone and VTOL technologies for aircraft. Other people might be, into the infamous AI and machine learning side of it. But their stated goal is that they need to swat up in their own time on that vertical industry technology and come and present once a month to the rest of their team, which immediately gives them and myself and the company two benefits. The one is that as the months progress, they actually become an expert in this age of acceleration, in a new age, call it technology, completely unrelated to our company, but that actually sets them apart from the competition. And secondly, of course, is that the other staff do not have to go and spend 40, 50 hours downloading PDFs and visiting websites to acquire the same knowledge. They simply have to attend that 10-minute executive session on that technology for the month, and they've got the same info at hand. Now, the time to put those programs together, to do the research, etc., is well worth it, because by the time that those guys leave me, they literally version 3, whereas my competitor is just sitting with the older version 1.
Yeah, sure.
That makes sense to you?
Absolutely. And I think it's a great service to your employees. And as you were talking, it helped me think of the parallels with overlanding and a team in overlanding. If you encourage one member of your team to become proficient at wilderness first aid, and the other person of your team needs to research and understand as much as possible around navigation, even celestial navigation, the newest, most current apps on navigation. The other person needs to understand mechanics and preventative and predictive maintenance. And if you can really think about how do you assign those things to other members of the team, not just whatever they're good at to begin with, but what are they also interested in learning more about?
Yeah. When you can, you definitely get where I'm going with it. You can add things like recovery techniques. Just send one guy to go and learn advanced recovery techniques and come share that knowledge with the rest of your staff. Basic survival skills. When everything goes tits up, what do you need to do to survive before SARS actually gets to you? Or but it's something that anybody in any business can utilize immediately with their staff, starting Monday kind of thing.
And a special thanks to Realtruck for their support of this week's podcast. Find your freedom and follow your own trail in the fresh air of vast, uncharted places. Introducing the exclusive Realtruck lineup of overlanding accessories designed to take adventurous explorers just like you into the furthest reaches, with gear for camping, off-roading, and more, including the all-new Realtruck Go Rack, Go Tent and Overland Awning. And here's to those inspired, self-actualized, brave souls that are ready to unplug and check in to pure wilderness. Bring your truck to life at Realtruck.com. One of the things that I was interested in asking you about, because so many people who listen to the podcast own their own businesses, they're entrepreneurs or they're independent contractors. Many of them are making an effort in, starting their own media or influencer programs around overlanding. What are some of your top pieces of advice around helping people be more effective in business or with their business?
Scott, so if I can answer that question in two parts. In terms of making other business owners or entrepreneurs more effective, there's a chapter in my book. I think I called it "Avoiding Day 2," and it's something that I stole from Jeff Bezos at Amazon. It's a mantra that he's had in Amazon, and I've copied that to great effect in my own business, and I think everybody should try and remember that. So what is avoiding day 2? So avoiding day 2, you first have to know what is a day 1 mindset. Now, a day 1 mindset is that entrepreneurial mindset where you embrace change, you embrace trends quickly, because fighting a powerful trend is actually fighting the future, right? If you embrace a trend, you immediately have got a tailwind in terms of your competition. So a day 1 mindset is where you make high velocity, high quality decisions, but at only 70% of the available data. Now that is not something that a corporate guy does. Big companies, slow moving companies will wait until they've got 100% of the available data before they make a decision. You don't, as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, have that benefit. If you want to get a leg up on the competition and you want to really scale your business, you have to make a high quality, high speed decision when there's only 70% of the available data available to that. You can always change course, but I've seen more opportunities lost where people, their inability to act when there's an opportunity, then making a wrong decision. You can correct a wrong decision, but indecision, just aimlessly circling the airport in a holding pattern, burning fuel, is a death sentence. So day 1 mindset, take risks, accept failure. And I think most importantly, don't model your business on a product, on a financial objective, or on a certain technology. Your business focus should be on one thing obsessively, and that's clients. That's it. Know what your clients want, know what they expect from you, know how to delight them. So day 1 mindset, summarized, embrace change, make high velocity, high quality decisions when there's only 70% of the data available, take risks, accept the failure, and be obsessive about clients. A day 2 mindset is where you've attained success in your business and that complacency starts kicking in. And the moment complacency starts kicking in, you start getting stasis, where you stop learning because you're successful now. So, you don't have to put in the hours, you don't have to worry about the competition. And the next moment, that stasis is followed by irrelevance, followed by something that he calls excruciating, painful decline. And that is, you see that in big companies. I'm not going to say IBM, but you see that in big companies that got too big, too slow. And you can probably even look at some of the internal combustion companies, the motor companies globally, in terms of fighting off, small, nimble EV vehicle upstarts. And why? Because those guys are acting like day 1. You look at guys like Elon, Tesla. No matter how big Tesla is, I mean, he still acts like a day 1 mindset. And you can see that in terms of SpaceX. You can see that in
flamethrowers. So
100%.
yeah,
He embraces a day 1 mindset. If you've got a day two mindset, I don't think you'll last a day in any one of Elon's companies. So that's one part of it. But that's things to do. But there's also things that I think, having been 30 years in business, that things that I wish I knew that I could have avoided, would have helped me scale faster and make a lot more money if I paid more attention to that earlier in my career. And I see that with guys starting a business. A couple of things I can think of off the bat: not writing down their business plan. They sort of just wing it. You need to write down that business plan. Developing your marketing strategy and then actually implementing it. Circling back to cash flow. Don't worry about profit or loss. You absolutely have to keep an eye on your cash flow. Another point is entrepreneurs and small business owners try and avoid lawyers by not understanding the importance of a legal contract. Things like securing your IP or intellectual property when your company is still small. It's only when things go wrong that you suddenly start realizing how important legal contracts are to protect you, your company, and your staff. And I think the last two things for me would be that in the beginning, I tried to do everything myself. It took me too long to hire people and to bring on help and to start delegating. If you do not master the skill of delegation, you will never scale your business to where you want to take it. Yeah. And then I think the very last one is continuous learning, is just being humble enough to realize that you can never know everything in your sector or your business. Your rate of learning must always exceed the rate of change in your industry and the rate of change in your competitors. And I think that is crucial, that continuous learning, continual curiosity, on everything in life.
Well, and it's interesting on that last point, by you investing in your employees to learn these new and emergent technologies, you have expanded your rate of learning as well. So by delegating the learning and the curiosity, you've made your entire business more effective in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I tongue in cheek, I always say to my guys, in the old days, they used to tell you, just master the 3 R's and you'll be good to go until retirement. And of course, the 3 R's is reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? So the days of the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, are long gone. It's the 4 C's. It's the 4 C's that you need to concentrate on. And that goes for your professional life as well as your personal life. And I think that's creativity, out the box thinking, collaboration, critical thinking skills, and most importantly, communication. Those 4: creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking skills. Yeah. So concentrate on the 4 C's, forget about the 3 R's that Mom taught you about.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I think also in business, one of the things that's been interesting for me to learn is failure. As entrepreneurs, we don't want to fail. We get attached to these ideas and the possibility of our idea coming to fruition, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. Sometimes there's a competitor that does it way better than you, but there's other areas of your business that you do better than other people. And learning to let go of those areas where the business is struggling, before it creates such an impact to your cash flow that you can't come back for it. And then I think also, and this very much applies in travel as well. If your plan isn't going well on your adventure, if you're pushing too hard, if you're trying to do 500 kilometers a day in Africa, you're going to struggle. You're going to put yourself at risk. You're going to be driving at night. You're going to soon be very unpopular with the rest of the people in your team, your spouse or partner, whoever else. So learning to say, all right, my original plan isn't working. I have failed in planning that properly, and we need to slow down, or we need to adjust our expectations. And I think as leaders, it's so important to admit when we make mistakes. I believe it is actually a hallmark of leadership. I find that managers don't admit failure, leaders admit failure to their team. So it makes them more approachable. It also allows your team to recognize that they can make mistakes too, and that they can be supported through that process. Because it's like you said, it's impossible to be perfect 100% of the time.
Interesting point you raised is how does travel change a person, and how does travel and adventure change me as a person? And you're mentioning Africa now specifically, because of course rule one of traveling in Africa is being camped before the sun sets. But traveling in Africa as taught me patience as I get older. There's absolutely no benefit losing your cool with a customs official in Africa. It will actually just go very wrong for you. And of course, dealing with language barriers, in different countries. I think as you get older, your EQ should improve, and much your IQ. And that even extends to things like, walk a water crossing. There's no reason to rush through a water crossing. Walk it, and before you put the vehicle through it. So Africa time has taught me patience as I got older, and has made me run a better business. And traveling in Southeast Asia, Kim and myself did a 1,500-mile adventure bike trip through Myanmar just before the military junta took control of the country, 2019, I think it was. And we visited some remote mountain tribes on the western side of Myanmar that's never seen a European female. So the villagers were coming out of their huts when she took a full face helmet off a bike, because they've never seen a European female up high in the mountains. That's very close to the border of Bangladesh. Now, those people are basically having subsistence, living on less than $1 a day. They can't speak a word of English, but the chief would come out of his hut and offer his house for us to sleep on. They don't have beds, by the way. They sleep directly on the floor, on a mat. So there's 2 rooms in the chief's house. The one is the kitchen, and the one is the room where they sleep. So you sleep with the chief, his family, and his kids, and they share what little food they can grow there. And suddenly you just realize, it makes you humble. It makes you humble that somebody can take you in, doesn't know where you're from, can't speak a word of English, make you sleep with his family on the floor, and share what little food they've got. And so I think patience and being more humble is definitely 2 takeaways from travel for me, personally speaking.
Yeah, those are important lessons, and then that it permeates into the rest of your life as well. You mentioned your trip to Myanmar. What's been your favorite adventure? The one that makes you smile the biggest, the one that you look back on and that you're most proud of?
Sure. You didn't prep me for that one, Scott.
It's good.
So
It's good. It's good. I want it to be more emotional, so.
yeah. So yeah, there's one. There's one that nearly went wrong. So there's 2 trips, if I have to look back. The one was with a mate of mine, Patrick Kraybach, and that works for, I think, Frontrunner now.
Yeah.
He invited me in 2008. He gave me a call in Cape Town, and he said, "Listen, Mitsubishi's got a Pajero. They want him as magazine editor to take this Pajero from Joburg, through the Serengeti, Ngora crater, crossing Lake Victoria, going to Rwanda, finding the silverback gorillas in the Volcanoes National Park, and then eventually visiting Uganda, the actual source of the Nile. But we're not allowed to put any mod on this dealer standard Pajero. The only thing we can do is put a roof rack on so that tables and chairs and that kind of stuff can do it. And we did that trip.
What about the tires?
Just normal all-terrain tires that it comes with. So we were not allowed any form of mods. No winch, no upgraded suspension, not even a rooftop tent. And we drove that vehicle. It must have been just over 8,500 kilometers over 3 weeks. Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda. And she did it. We had, I think, one blown shock in Uganda, and there was a Mitsubishi dealer, believe it or not, in Kampala. But what a trip! It was nearly 20 years ago. But every time I think about it, I start smiling, and that's probably because of my travel companion too. That's got his own sense of humor. And then on a more serious note, was not on the overlanding side. Was Kim and myself had a goal to try and finish the Global 7 mountains, summiting the Global 7. And we were in Russia at Mount Elbrus.
Yeah.
And we were busy with a acclimatization climb, and an unforecasted cold front came in at about 5,500 meters in a complete, utter whiteout, with the temperatures dropping to minus 40 degrees centigrade. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but let me tell you, minus 40 degrees centigrade is freezing cold. So it's a wipeout. You can't see in front of you. And our Russian guide had a VHF radio on him, and we had to start negotiating with base camp, the Russians at base camp, that had these very, very powerful ski-doos. But you first had to negotiate the rescue charge before they come out and help you. So only in Russian, huh? So we agreed on what our lives are worth dollar amount, and about half an hour later, those ski-doos were there to take us off. But the very next day was our summer day, and it was a beautiful day to summit. I think we started about 2 a.m. in the morning, and the wind came up probably about 1,000 meters from the summit, and there was a party in front of us, and there was a sudden gust of wind, and the back climber in the party just got swept off the wind, off the ridge line about 800 meters down. And there and then, you sort of ask yourself, is any of the risk that I am taking here worth what just happened here? And for a moment, you're actually thinking of turning around, saying, I'm packing it in, because that could have been us, or myself or Kim getting swept off Mount Elbrus there. But risk is something, once again, that you must embrace. And if there wasn't risk in travel, it wouldn't be adventurous, I guess.
Yeah,
but
you'd be a tourist.
100%, then get on a cruise ship and go play bingo, whatever they do on a cruise ship. But those two trips, the Rwandan silverback one with Patrick, and summiting Mount Elbrus with Kim, with the resultant challenges we experienced there, those two stand out for me above all of them.
Well, that's an incredible accomplishment. Of the 7 summits, how many were you able to do?
So we managed 4 before we decided that being paid in South African rands and not in hard currency.
Yeah.
I always say it's a very delicate balance, Scott, between utilizing what funds you've got to do the most challenging way out adventures and overland travels, vis-a-vis ensuring that, what do you guys call it, your 401k? What have you got on that side? 401ks.
Yeah.
Making sure that your investment decisions are prudent for retirement, etc. Because if you get one wrong and you live to an old age, you're going to have a very boring life. And if you get it wrong on the wrong side of that equation, you're going to end up I'm going to say that the trailer park, ordering cat food on an app, and your neighbors know that you don't own a cat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you talk a little bit about balance in your book, but one of the things that I think balance is very difficult to attain. I think that we go through chapters in our life where we're out of balance one way or the other.
Yeah.
And that's the only way that I think the more that I try to find balance, the more unsatisfied I am because I'm not doing anything particularly well. So I find that I need to go through periods of time where I focus on adventure, or I focus on my business, or I focus on um, making investments in my future. And I do find that if I go through that cycle, and maybe it's that I struggle with multitasking, um, but I find that if I focus on one thing more intently for a chapter of my life, that I end up with better outcomes. How have you found striking that balance between your professional life and your personal life?
So my wife, for starters, says I can't multitask, and I've had to make peace with it. But I have also replied to her that when I do focus on something, I focus 150%, which my competitor can't. So I can be very goal driven, and ignoring the white noise on the side, and of course that can be a huge advantage in business. But you can miss the nuances in life if you're too goal driven. So I understand what you say, that if you focus too much on one side of the spectrum, then by default you start neglecting the other side of it. The hardest thing for me in investment was to realize that you know I believe strongly in the Magnificent Six or Magnificent Seven. Be USD based, offshore, be in tech, and preferably something that's got to do with AI. But it's not timing the market that's important. It's the time in the market. And it took me a long time to realize buying and selling is not how you make money. You buy and hold. And I think Warren Buffett, understands that to the nth degree. But don't try and time markets so that you make some money for retirement. Buy quality blue chip shares and forget about them. Just absolutely forget about them. When there is a market correction, you will notice that 95% of human beings, when there's a market crash or let's just use the word correction rather, they sell, they panic. Now, what is a market correction other than it's a massive sale that's on, it's Black Friday or Cyber Monday or whatever. You should be running into the shop when there's a sale on and picking up more blue chip shares at a discounted price, not selling when it hits a low with the rest of the sheep herd. So staying calm when there's a market crash, buy and hold strategy, time in the market, not timing the market. Just I focus on the travel side and I buy my blue chips and I leave them alone. That's something. If I followed that advice in my 20s and 30s, I wouldn't have an old Defender here on the driveway. What are those new Ineoses?
I also wanted to take a brief moment to thank all of you for listening to the Overland Journal podcast. By listening to this podcast and subscribing to the Overland Journal magazine, you're supporting our employee-owned and veteran-owned business. Impartial reviews and in-depth content like this would not be possible without your support. If you enjoy the podcast, I think you'd really love the print magazine as well. And 100% of that subscription price goes back into creating the content like you're listening to right now. And as a special thank you for your loyalty, we're giving 20% off any subscription. And that even includes our special lifetime subscription, which includes numerous lifetime-only benefits. You can go to overlandjournal.com and use the code OverlandPodcast at checkout. Again, that's code OverlandPodcast at checkout, and that'll give you 20% off. I sincerely appreciate your support. So I was in Johannesburg in March of 2020. I had just been in Namibia for the launch of the new Defender, and COVID was beginning to take its hold on even Southern Africa. And I was in Johannesburg in an Airbnb trying to decide what to do because my options were becoming very limited. And it was during those few days that the market had its greatest correction. And because I didn't have anything else to do, the world seemed frozen for a moment, that
Yes.
I actually had enough wherewithal to realize that the world is panicking about something that will be fixed. Like they're going to find a way to resolve this, through vaccines or whatever else. And I said, if there was ever a time in my life where I had the chance to go in and buy everything on sale, it was today, and I did. And
Yeah.
it was a terrifying idea to take every bit of cash I could muster and put it into
Yeah.
the market, but it changed my life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And listen, the moment that the Fed on your side starts tapering down interest rates, hopefully in December again, you're going to see, your huge sovereign wealth funds, etc., starting to step out of cash,
yep,
going risk on, and your equity markets expanding even further.
yeah,
That's my firm belief. But
yeah.
you know, T's and C's apply. I'm not an investment
Yeah,
specialist.
this is not investment advice. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation. One of the things that I like to ask is, and you've written your own book, which I think people need to take a look at. It's a really interesting volume that incorporates a lot of your life experiences and how it's affected your ability to make good decisions in business. So I think that your book is a great one. But what are some other books that you have read or that you find or have been a bit of a luminary for you in your own learnings?
There's a book called The Diary of a CEO.
Yeah,
I think it came out about maybe 6 months ago.
yeah,
I was skeptical at first because the author is quite a young dude from the UK.
yeah.
I think he's still in his 30s.
He has a great
But
podcast.
absolutely. But I actually decided for my sins, by the way, my daily vehicle is also a Defender, but it's a D300,
Yeah,
the,
sure.
the newer one. It breaks a little bit less than the TD5. But But I put that podcast on, I think it was audiobooks, The Diary of a CEO, and I decided to go through the entire one. And I have to say that it's probably one of the best books I have listened to this year. I highly recommend it to friends. I recommend it to clients as well. And then, in your spare time, anything that Mr. Hunter wrote, uh, Fear and Loathing in Vegas, I think it
Yeah,
is.
sure.
Yeah, and Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea. It's when you get older, you start appreciating the classics more, I think.
Yeah, and his prose, just the efficiency of his prose is something that I need to be reminded of on occasion. So,
Yeah, I think uh, I think it was the founder of Apple, Steve Jobs himself, that said that the ultimate innovation is simplicity. It's not what you can add, it's what you can strip away and still have full functionality. And that's something I think that you can actually take through to writing as well. And prose is brevity, I think, is underrated.
oftentimes, and remembering that we have two ears and only one mouth, so as much time
Yeah,
as we can spend listening to others, the better. So,
touche. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I feel like we could schedule three more of them just to dive into some of the topics. I mean, just having a discussion around your four of the seven summits would be an incredible conversation. How do people find out more about you? How do people find out more about your travels and your business, and where do people find your book?
So it's on Amazon, Kindle and Amazon. You could just go to Amazon and typing Overlanding Through the Boardroom. And if you want to know a little bit more about my adventures with Kim, just go to johandevilliers.com, www.johandevilliers.com. Most of our travel adventures are on there as well. Yeah.
Well, it's been a sincere pleasure. Thank you for all of the great content that you've provided to Overland Journal and Expedition Portal through the years. Thanks for being an inspiration to so many, not only in business, but in travels as well. And I look forward to our next conversation. And hopefully someday we get to bump into each other on a dusty road in the middle of Africa.
Thank you for making the time. And if you do get to read the book, Scott, you'll notice that you've got acknowledgement yourself at the back there, in the back of the book.
I haven't gotten to that point. You recommended a couple sections that I was able to go through, and they were great. So
yeah, because you were actually one of the muses that inspired me. Just contributing to Expedition Portal and Overland Journal was one of the fuses that got lit that actually made me sit down and decide, 2024, I actually need to write a book and stop coming up with excuses. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
No, you're very welcome. And that's a reminder to all of us, including those that are listening, is to pursue those big ideas. Go for it. We've only got this one shot, so we might as well reach for something big. Yes, and we thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.